The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Thank you for coming to the Project Entertainment Network store. Please place your order. A good choice. A t-shirt for the horror show with Brian Keene. Amanda Method coffee mug. There's more. A Necrocastic on hoodie. That's sharp. But why on earth would you want Bizong leggings? Wait, are you Mr. Frank? The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with goodies from all your favorite podcasts. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs and more. www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian, firstly, I say Excelsior, as always. But secondly, I think it's really interesting, and I want to sort of out you to our listening audience, all three people that listen to this show.
Okay.
I'm outing you as a guy who really doesn't want this run on Defenders to end. Who doesn't want to move on to other obscure Marvel comics, because it's this thing where it's like, Brian, we can do 3 episodes, 3 issues, Brian, and you're like, no, these 2, they're meaty enough for us to just do 2. And I think it's because you're trying to stretch this out because you don't want the Defenders to end.
I do believe these 2 issues are meaty enough for an entire episode, issues 134 and 135, but I will admit to you, I am trying to stretch it out. Unlike you, I've been reading these in the collected versions, the Marvel Essential versions. Currently, we are on volume 7, and that, unfortunately, does not complete the run. It goes up to, hang on one second here, it goes up to Defenders 139. Oh. And as you and I talked about, there are issues after that, so I am trying to stall you just long enough to buy the back issues.
Oh, I'm sure that if you need help tracking those down, we could help with that.
I've actually got them on the way now.
Oh, good. Well, I'm the current batch that we're reading. I've been reading in Marvel Epic, Defenders Epic Collection, Volume 8, which goes up to, let's see, issue 137.
Right.
Then I will go back to my original floppy comics, which I do have.
Though, you brought it up, and we haven't really talked about it with the listening audience. So you know what? You're worried about this episode not being long enough. Let's fill in here at the beginning. We will go to the end of the original Defenders run. And then, as we talked about, we want to include, while we're not going to get into modern comics, we probably won't do, for example, Eric Larson's Defenders from the mid-90s or Matt Fraction's Defenders but we do want to circle back around to J.M. DeMatteis and Keith Giffen's Defenders Indefensible miniseries.
Right.
It's only 5 issues, and because both of them were, turned in such seminal work on the series, we do want to revisit what they did later.
Yeah.
But then,
and the Gargoyle miniseries.
But then after those, we will be moving on to the Champions.
Yes.
Another 70s Marvel series, which featured a number of the Defenders. So we hope you'll stay tuned for that.
Yeah, the Champions, I'm really, well, again, we have obviously plenty to do in the meantime, but I'm looking forward to getting to the Champions, because if you think the Defenders are weird, and what I love about reading, and we haven't mentioned this, but in reading the new Defenders, which includes members of the Champions, there are frequent references
Absolutely.
to what a disaster the champions team was.
Yep.
So I love that fact that that in the Defenders we have these references where Iceman and Angel continually refer to what a total disaster the champions was. So it should be interesting. But
Are we going to change the name of the show when we get to the champions?
No. It'll still be Defenders Dialogue.
Not Champions Chat.
No, because the champions is only like 18 issues. Then we'll have to, change it to who knows what. It's, it's going to be like, Tiger Tales or something like that. Who the hell knows?
Giant-sized men things.
Well, that should have been the title from the beginning. Giant.
All right.
Yes.
Well, let's get to.
While you tell people where we're beginning, I'm moving my phone out of my office so that if it rings, it won't disturb us. I usually do this before we begin, but I screwed up. So go ahead.
Yes, 134, written by Peter B. Gillis, drawn by Don Perlin, inks by Kim DeMulder, and the title is Manslaughter. And we open with the Beast back from his college speaking tour, returning to the New Defenders New Mexico headquarters, and he's thinking that it's very strange. No one met him at the airport, and he had to walk up to the mountain on foot, and the Defenders mansion is trashed. The lights aren't on, and he says it looks like it's cleaned up from the fight they had, but why aren't the lights on?
I want to just jump in and say that opening splash page of the Beast from behind, probably very few people will have any idea what I'm talking about here, but it's Perlin and DeMulder who've become a great team on this book, and we've enjoyed Perlin the whole time, but that one splash page looks so much like Gene Colan drew it.
Oh, absolutely.
That It made me think I wish Gene Colan was drawing this book at the time.
That did not occur to me, but now that you bring it up, I see that all over it.
Yep, even like the paint, the jeans and everything, like it really looks like Colan drew it, and I was like, oh, how cool would that have been? But anyway.
And the Beast looks like a badass in it. I mean, it could almost be Wolverine from the back,
Yes. Yep. Yeah. He does look like a badass. So yes. So he goes in, he's wondering what the hell's going on, and he is accosted from behind by a woman in the shadows who turns out to be Valkyrie.
Right.
But of course, he's apologizing. She's apologizing, I should say. And they're, he's trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. He's asking what's going on, and Angel says it's a long story, but they're all standing around listening to a thing that our younger readers probably don't know what the hell it is. An answering machine, Brian.
That's right. Answering machines were like voicemail, except you couldn't carry them around in your pockets.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. It really is. Yeah, somebody has been leaving them, to put it in terms for our younger readers, terrorizing voicemails.
Yes, and those voicemails are from somebody who is threatening their lives, saying they're going to die at the hands of Manslaughter. Moondragon gets angry that they keep playing it over and over again. Cloud is upset. She doesn't like, it's getting to her, and she doesn't like that. Beast is sort of nonplussed. He's like, look, this happens all the time. We get death threats all the time because we're superheroes. Yeah. So, and then, Cloud starts to explain that it started with her. And we get a series of flashbacks, Brian. And it's really interesting that this is the way the story is told, because Beast has come in and the Defenders are catching him up on something we, the readers, have not yet seen.
Right. Yeah, Cloud is lounging in her bikini out by the pool, which she has done a lot of so far.
Yeah, right.
During her time with the Defenders. And suddenly, she notices this beautiful garland of flowers around her neck. And she goes into, she figures Bobby or Warren or somebody gave them to her. She goes in to ask the Defenders about it. And what happens, Chris?
Well, a bunch of tiny, deadly snakes emerge from the garland of flowers. She freaks out and, tosses it off of her, and Valkyrie throws a dagger at one of the snakes. And there's a note on the flowers, and Moondragon reads it. It says, "Sleep no more. Manslaughter doth murder sleep." There are no psychic vibrations from the note, she says.
Right.
So then Angel says that was just the beginning. Because as he started to investigate, I don't know why he got into costume to do a fly through of his own house. His costume has no powers or whatever. But he finds there's nothing going on. Moondragon does a mental search of the house, and there's no trace that Manslaughter has been there.
But there is a trace, because they find a note pinned to Warren's wing. And he didn't even feel it getting stuck there, and Iceman pulls it off. And this note says, "This could just as easily have been a dagger. Next time, it will be." And the note is signed Manslaughter.
There you go. And then we have the most unintentionally funny sequence, which is Bobby Drake, once again nude except for his panties and boots. I don't understand why Bobby Drake is always only, I still don't get the whole underpants thing.
I don't either.
I mean, it's fine for the thing, because he's made of stone. But even then, it's a little silly. But Bobby Drake is just a dude. Anyway, so he's working out on the on the weights, and while he's doing that, a metal bar swings down into his bare chest and begins to burn, branding itself into his chest. He ices himself up, but it melts right through, and he's not able to hold his iced form. And then the moment he's no longer able to hold his iced form, it releases.
That's right. It leaves a message seared into his chest that says, "The heat is on," which was at the time was a very popular top 40 song by Glenn Frey, formerly of the Eagles. It was from the Beverly Hills Cop soundtrack. It was about the year this issue was out. So a nice little play on words there.
Yeah, that's Anyway, so that's what's going on here. We continue our series of flashbacks to show that Gargoyle also is affected by this. Although, I should say, Gargoyle appears to have been affected by this.
Right, and here's the thing. So far, everybody else has just been terrorized. They haven't, other than Bobby's burn, they haven't actually been hurt. But Gargoyle actually vanishes in thin air in front of the other defenders. He starts like phasing in and out, and then this anagram of flame appears in midair, and it traps Isaac inside, and then he vanishes.
And as they're reacting to Isaac's vanishing, Valkyrie reaches for her sword Dragonfang, only to find that it's been stolen.
Right.
And in its place is a note. "She who lives by the sword shall die by the sword." Again from Manslaughter. And then you and I will argue about this, Brian, I'm sure. But then we get the appearance of Manslaughter for the first time. And I have to say, the build-up is much better than the reveal, because Manslaughter is a silly-looking character.
I agree. I don't know why we would argue about this.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to disagree with me. He looks like he was designed by a very young Rob Liefeld.
Yeah. When I was a teenager, I thought Manslaughter was a silly character.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 90s, when Rob Liefeld and the others kind of took over comics, I genuinely felt that every X-Man character they designed was based on Manslaughter. Yeah, this is the dawn of the pouches right here.
Yeah, it's really weird to me, because he's holding Dragonfang in this panel, And I'm sure that when you post this on YouTube, you'll post an image of Manslaughter. But
Absolutely.
he's got his mask tied around the back of his head. He's got sort of like a little ribbon tied, like a bow tie almost. And I don't know what that red thing is that's on his left breast, is like a tassel, like he's half a stripper. And then he's carrying like a purple overnight bag.
Right.
Like it's his carry-on bag from he got off the plane to come terrorize the Defenders with his carry-on bag, and it's still with him. This has got to be a handicap when he goes to fight somebody, that he's got his carry-on bag slung over his shoulder, but nevertheless it's there.
Yeah. It's a ridiculous costume.
I'm mystified by and he becomes an interesting character. I'm not going to take that away. I do think the character over time becomes fairly interesting, but he's so stupid looking.
It is. But props to Gillis. I do like the way he writes Valkyrie, and we see it here on this page, because while the rest of the Defenders are stunned, Valkyrie snaps into action. This motherfucker stole her sword.
Right.
And, Gillis really writes her fierce and, the warrior that she is.
Right. And playing into her identity as a Valkyrie, because she says, you'll hear not from us save your death song.
Yeah.
So there's,
And she tosses a dagger, and Manslaughter snatches it out of thin air.
Yeah. So, and Cloud demands to know why he's terrorizing them. And he says, I might say that it's because you messed up a certain crime boss's cocaine operation and he hired me, but the proper answer is because it's fun.
So if you thought we were done with Typhoon and what was the other silly character's name? Cutlass, we're not. Unfortunately, the repercussions fall into this issue.
And then Manslaughter makes a Monty Python reference. When he's about to disappear, he says, and now it's time for the penguin on top of your television set to explode. And he snaps his fingers and vanishes.
Right. And there is indeed, their television does indeed explode.
Yeah. So he's some kind of psychic assassin. Moondragon insists that with the band off of her head, she could find him, but with it on, there's no defense, and Valkyrie's not falling for that. She's like,
Valkyrie says, your ploy will not work, woman. The ban will remain until you have learned true humility, or until Odin himself decrees it.
That's right. Yeah, Valkyrie's definitely not falling for that. But the Beast says he has an idea. And on that note, we cut to the evening, where the Defenders are all gathered in a room. Valkyrie has some kind of, what is it?
Like a spear?
Yeah, a battle spear
of
some kind, yeah. And Cloud says, sorry guys, I've got to use the little girl's room. And, she's going off.
And I want to point out here to the readers, at this point, every issue so far, Gillis has played with a different genre.
Yeah.
We had his ode to Carpenter's The Thing. We had his ode to the Yellow Menace pulps. That's the term they used to call them. Please don't get mad at me. And now we have him doing 80s slasher flicks. Because this really does become Sleepaway Camp or Halloween or Friday the 13th.
Yes.
When she says, I need to use the restroom, they're like, no, we need to all stay together. What happens in every slasher film? As soon as you split up, people start getting killed.
Yeah. And then, of course, Cloud goes into the bathroom, and Manslaughter leaps out from inside the shower and apparently, Brian, cuts her throat. Valkyrie breaks into the bathroom with her spear, and they find Cloud, to all intents and purposes, or at least from what we can tell, dead on the floor. The Defenders are gathered around her.
Right.
So they've got to find him. So they spread out, again, like in every slasher movie. Let's all split up and search the house. If only one of them had Scooby-Doo with them.
Ruh-roh, Raggy.
Oh my god, that would have been great. The Defenders meeting Scooby-Doo. Dead air. Brian, you don't like that idea?
No, I'm laughing about it. I was thinking if there's a way to make it happen. I mean, we've got DeMatteis and Giffen writing.
Yeah, right? DeMatteis and Giffen should do Scooby-Doo meets the 1970s Defenders.
They should.
Excuse me. We're saying his name wrong again.
We are.
I'm never going to get used to that. DeMatteis. All right. So there we go. So basically then we have, it's almost like, then Manslaughter leaps out at Iceman, grabs him around the neck and basically chokes him out.
Right.
Iceman looks dead. It says 2 down. Then he fights the Angel, and he sprays him with some kind of gas that, he puts a bag over his head.
Yeah, smothers him to death with a bag.
Angel smashes out the window, and it ends up suffocating him, so he falls, again, it looks like he's falling to his doom.
Right. Then Val confronts Manslaughter, and Manslaughter tells her, "I'm going to kill you with your own sword." He's holding Dragonfang. Now, had I thought of this back when I was a teenager, I would have written in for a no prize, because remember from previous episodes that, particularly that Marvel team up issue, when Spider-Man had his hands on Dragonfang. Dragonfang has a mind of its own.
Right.
So I don't know why Manslaughter can wield it like this. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, you're right. I think you would have needed to write in for that no prize and explain it. But in this case, maybe, Brian, my no prize comes because Manslaughter has found some way to make himself invisible to all sensation, such that even Moondragon's mental powers cannot locate him. So Dragonfang doesn't even know that anyone's touching it.
Right.
Do I get a no prize?
It works for me. We also thought that would explain how Manslaughter was able to coat Dragonfang with an incredibly deadly poison. Interacting with the sword's magic, it could deal Valkyrie mortal harm, as he explains to her.
Yeah. Well, so then he cuts her, and she falls, and he drops Dragonfang, and he is then alone in the Defender's area, except for Moondragon, who's essentially just been waiting for him. She says, "I have heard the death screams of my fellow Defenders in my mind. Now you must face the one foe who can defeat you, another telepath." So it turns out he's been a telepath all along. But she hits him with a mental blast, some kind of psionic blast. He manages to get up, but he says, "You have only succeeded in linking my nervous system to your mind in an unbreakable bond."
Right.
And then, to cause her pain, he cuts his own palm with a knife. So anything he does to himself, she will feel.
Yep. He says, "Face it, Moondragon, the only way you'll stop me is to kill me, and you'll experience death either way." Then he cuts his own throat, and thus cuts her throat.
Yeah, I mean not completely, but yes, he cuts he makes a slice in his throat, and then he says, "To a fellow telepath, I offer a choice. How do you want to die?" And then, out of the blue, from nowhere, we get, "How about of old age, laser breath?" And he's struck by some kind of blast, simultaneously a blast of ice and a blast of lightning from cloud. And he says, "What? How?" Now, Brian, I need another no prize for this, or you need to explain this to earn a no prize, because how then does Moondragon not feel what has just been done to him? But
I'm going to say because both Cloud and Bobby love Moondragon and would never consciously hurt her.
Oh, okay.
And therefore, the pain induced on Manslaughter does not transfer via the psychic bond.
Oh my God, Jesus Christ! Anyway, we find out that when Cloud's throat was slit, she turned into her Cloud form, but only where the knife passed through, so it looked like she died.
Right.
And then when Manslaughter snapped Iceman's neck, that wasn't Iceman at all, but Cloud wrapped in an ice sheath.
Right. And she simply gasified as soon as he attacked.
Then when Angel fell, Iceman was secretly there, below decks, essentially, to create an ice slide and a bunch of snow for him to fall into.
Right. So this was the Beast's plan all along. It was, hey, let's reenact Friday the 13th, but let's all trick Jason into thinking he killed us.
Right. Which again, like, to my mind, it's like, well, why didn't you just all team up to begin with? But okay. Anyway, then Valkyrie and Angel, however, Brian, both have actually been poisoned, and Iceman has frozen them into cryogenic sleep inside blocks of ice. And the less we examine that, the better. In their cryogenic sleep, apparently they need no oxygen whatsoever.
No.
I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, that's fine.
And then Moondragon says the first sensible thing in this entire issue when she suggests that they kill Manslaughter. And, the Beast is having none of that. He says, don't be crazy, Moondragon. We don't kill people. And she snaps on him. She says, you don't understand what he is, what he's done. He entered my brain. He ravaged my mind. He made me bleed. She goes on to say how violated she feels. And I think this is a really great scene here. I think this is some of Gillis's best work on the book so far. Moondragon breaks. This proud character has just this complete collapse. And then young Cloud comes to her and says, don't cry, Moondragon. Please don't cry because I love you.
Exactly. Which begins what I think is the most interesting element of Gillis's run on the Defenders. And a story that is way ahead of its time.
Agreed.
Way ahead of its time.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. If this storyline was done now, all of the right-wing snowflakes would be screaming and crying about how Gillis was an SJW trying to ram his politics down their throats. But in the 80s, it was just interesting.
Exactly.
It was just storytelling, but storytelling that was just really fascinating.
Right. I don't know if it's reprinted in the version you're reading, but we get in the Essentials volume, we get a glimpse of the letters page, Defenders, which was called Defenders Dialogue. And Gillis kind of introduces himself to the reading audience. He says that his first Marvel comic he ever read was Fantastic Four, issue 4. And, it talks about how he has a PhD in medieval literature and, eventually he puts that PhD to work writing Marvel comics. But up until now, he's been doing fill-in work. Captain America, Master of Kung Fu, Marvel 2-in-1, John Carter, What If. And now he's finally got a monthly series. It's the Defenders. And, with that in mind, if we examine these first few issues of his run, we've talked about how there hasn't been an ongoing narrative. They've all been like these one-and-done stories and experimenting with different genres, different styles of storytelling. I think that's evident here. This is a writer who was used to doing these one-and-done fill-in issues. And now you see him starting to relax and realize, oh, hey, I have an ongoing. These can be to be continued. I can set things up and do them in another issue. So let's see how he expands upon that going forward here.
Yeah, it's really it's really interesting, the stuff that he's got going on in the background. And I also think, again, it's the kind of thing that a new writer comes on and he starts to think beyond the the parameters that the previous writer has put on his own story. For instance, all of a sudden, we see that the mountaintop Eyrie, where Warren Worthington's new Defenders headquarters is actually not as high up on the mountain as we thought it was. And not only that, but there's a town called Heaven's Gate at the bottom of the mountain, in the foothills.
That's right.
And I think this is great. Oh, actually, it's the settlers called Heaven's Gate. The town is called Elijah, like the prophet.
Right.
And again, I think this is a really interesting thing that Gillis looked at it and said, "Oh yeah, this is interesting to me as a writer to think about the community that lives sort of in the shadow of what the Defenders are up to."
Right. And we meet one of those community members. He's the sheriff. His name is Garvin Mackin. And he's been the sheriff there for a long time. And, as he's starting his daily routine, I think there's some nice little touches here. Like he's getting coffee, and there's a little sign over the office coffee pot that says, please put some money in for the coffee you take. And it really grounds it in realism. His deputy and he are talking, and he goes outside and looks at the peaceful town, and then he sees, two medical helicopters flying toward the new Defenders headquarters. And he thinks to himself that this small town has changed since these superheroes moved in next door.
Yeah, exactly. So we should say also, this is Defenders 135. It's written by Gillis with art again by Perlin and DeMolder. And I really like this team, Brian. I really like the Perlin and DeMolder team.
I do as well.
Yeah,
I do as well.
I really like the art. It's indicative of the period, but a great exploration of what the art looked like in this period.
Well, another aside, we talk about the house art style of that period versus now. My son, Dungeon Master 77.1, he turned 11 this past week, and we had a party for him over the
Happy
weekend.
Birthday to Dungeon Master 77.1.
Exactly. He would say thank you, but he's at school right now. But during the party, we always do goodie bags for all the kids that attend, and I always buy comic books and stick them in the goodie bags. It's a great way to introduce kids to comics and reading, etc. This year, I bought 45 of those Marvel True Believers comics. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, basically they reprint Bronze Age Marvel stuff, and they sell them for $1 each. And so I bought 45 True Believers, Avengers, Ms. Marvel, Conan, stuff like that. Stuck those in the goodie bags. And I was watching the kids, and more than one of them commented on the art, how cool the artwork was.
Mm-hmm.
And these are kids, they're 10, 11. This is the age, where you either get hooked on comics or you don't. And I found it interesting that the Bronze Age art appeals to them much more than the modern art.
Yeah. It's really interesting. You have a lot of great detail, in these panels. It's just, it's gorgeous. Anyway, so we pick up where we left off, except that Candy Southern has flown in from California, and Candy has brought the medical teams to help out. Bobby has stayed up all night, keeping the temperatures stable for Valkyrie and Warren, who are still on ice. The medical team says life signs are minimal but stable, which I don't know how they can tell through giant blocks of ice, but I think that we need to spin off from this, and Valkyrie and Warren thaw out and they turn out to be the Thing. Not Ben Grimm, the Thing from the John Carpenter film.
Right.
So then we get the recap, and here's the moment that I'm not. They go into the kitchen where Dolly is washing dishes. Hank is peeling an apple with a dagger sitting on a stool in the kitchen. And Manslaughter who's a telepathic master assassin, is just sitting on the floor leaning against the cabinets with his arms tied behind his back.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Dolly is like within arm's reach of him, and Sassafras is running around the floor playing.
Right, and licking Manslaughter's face.
Yeah.
So anyway, it becomes an interesting dynamic here. Sassafras licks Manslaughter, and Dolly says, "Sassafras, don't lick him. You don't know where he's been." Which, I was just going to say something really fresh, Brian.
Go ahead.
Which I've said to Mary San Giovanni many times. Mary, don't lick him. You don't know where he's been. Anyway.
But that's the thing. Mary knows exactly where I've been. So we cut back to town, and the sheriff goes into the local restaurant, the local watering hole.
And again, I have to interrupt you and say, this scene could be in a comic book right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Why don't you explain what you mean?
So the sheriff of Elijah, New Mexico, walks into Texas bar, and there's two guys standing, leaning up against the bar, and one guy in a trucker hat is saying, "It's them goldarn Mexes, that's what." The other guy, whose name is Blowtorch Brand, says, "That's the truth, brother. That's telling it." And as the sheriff and the bartender chat on one side, the guy in the trucker hat and Blowtorch Brand are having a conversation where the guy in the trucker hat says they're taking jobs away from honest Americans. That's literally how it's written. Them and their greasy hair and darn music and kids working for less. So basically, it's literally like they're listening to Fox News and Trump's Twitter feed right now.
They then start talking about the Defenders headquarters, and they think that there's a lot of mutants up there. They use the racial slur of muties. They think that Warren is training an army of muties up there, and the sheriff interrupts him. And he says, "Mr. Worthington's a decent man, and just because he likes to hang glide, you think he's Dracula. If there are muties up there, they're Avengers. They work for the government."
Which causes Blowtorch Brand to say, "Superpowers, I'll show you a superpower." He lights with a lighter. He lights a shot of Jack Daniels on fire, drinks it, and then belches out the fire.
Right.
Then when they challenge him to say that I've seen fire eaters at carnivals, he uses his lighter, flicks his lighter, and then uses his hand, and we see he can control the flames, much like the X-Men villain Pyro.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Before we can see more of his display, though, one of the deputies busts in and says, "Sheriff, we've got monsters down by the sheriff's station."
And this is a funny bit, Brian. Go ahead.
This is my favorite part. Yeah, we see that the Beast and the rest of the Defenders have brought Manslaughter in, and the Beast is telling the sheriff, "But you don't understand. We're the Defenders." And the sheriff says, "And I'm telling you, I can't just lock up somebody on your say-so."
Right. So the Beast is like, "This guy's a paid assassin. He's a supervillain. We're here to deliver him to justice." And the sheriff is like, "Look, you don't have any right to have arrested this guy. I don't know that he's done anything."
He wants to know if the Defenders have read Manslaughter's rights.
Right, exactly. So, and I will say, the sheriff is right. This is an interesting injection of realism into Marvel Comics superheroes.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful segment that we, you think about the people in the Marvel universe. They live in especially residents of New York. They're used to seeing Galactus in the sky and Skrulls invading. I like this glimpse of the flyby states, the small town America, and how they deal with superheroes in the Marvel universe.
Like if Spider-Man webbed some guy up and hung him from a lamppost in this town, they would just cut him down.
Right. They'd probably arrest Spider-Man.
Yeah, exactly. Like There's no due process. There's no, Anyway, the only Marvel comic that we usually see that stuff in is Daredevil, but
Daredevil, and back in the late '80s, Nomad, which was he was without getting all convoluted. He was a clone of Bucky, the Winter Soldier, and his whole thing was he drove around on a motorcycle across the country and just went to all these small towns that the Avengers never visited and fought crime.
Now let's not even go there.
Yeah.
As soon as you say clone, I'm like, no. Anyway, so the bartender comes running from that bar that we had been in before, and the Defenders respond. Moondragon leaves the Beast, and Moondragon and Cloud run off to try to respond to this, and they find Blowtorch Brand behind the bar. He's literally on fire and drinking, and the bar is the actual counter is on fire. And Blowtorch Brand realizes, by the way, he's fine because he can control the fire.
Right.
But he realizes that Moondragon is sort of trying to get into his head. He screams at her and he throws a flaming bottle at her, lights her cape on fire. Yep. And Cloud, douses those flames and turns on Blowtorch Brand.
Right. And then it's Cloud and really her first solo fight. And she takes him on, and he fills her lungs. He fills up her lungs and forces all the oxygen out of her. She does that to him.
Yeah, she does that to him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to tell you by the art, but yeah, she basically sucks all the oxygen out of him.
Yeah.
And basically extinguishes him.
Yeah, and then the sheriff comes in with a fire extinguisher. They grab Blowtorch Brand, and then Cloud and Moondragon are going back out. We find Beast on the telephone with somebody, and basically when he hangs up the phone, or he doesn't, he hands the phone to the sheriff, and we find that Beast has called in General Argyle Fist, whose men are going to come and take Manslaughter to Washington.
Now, do you remember Argyle Fist?
No, please explain, because Argyle Fist sounds like something you'd pay for in certain establishments.
I remember seeing the name in Bronze Age Marvel Comics, but for the life of me, I don't think I ever read a comic where Argyle Fist actually appeared. I was a big reader of the Hulk, but that was always, General Thunderbolt Ross. I feel like Fist appeared somewhere, but I don't know where.
Yeah. I don't. Well, we'll have to look it up. It's a strange thing. In any case, we cut to a few days later. The Angel and Valkyrie are recovering from being poisoned. Candy Southern is doting on Warren. She finds Valkyrie's behavior to be very interesting, and her tone to be interesting. Valkyrie says, a Valkyrie can be imperiled in many ways, Candy, but illness is not one of them. That is a human gift. And Candy's troubled by the use of the word gift. Also troubled, Brian, is our friend Cloud.
That's right.
She knows all her memories were implants. The Defenders keep telling her that she's as normal as they are, that she's just one of the guys. But how can she be normal when she keeps having these feelings that she thinks are so wrong, so unthinkable? How am I supposed to know what sort of sicko I really am? I can't stop feeling them. Somebody's going to help me. Going to have to help me. I'm going mad. But how can I tell anybody? How,
That's right.
Brian?
That's right. And while she's having this personal crisis, I am ashamed, Chris.
Why is that?
Because Argyle Fist, we talked during our examination of Steve Gerber's run on the Defenders. We talked about how it was that Headman Nebulon issue of the Defenders and Captain America 194. Those were my first comic books I ever bought.
Yeah.
And Argyle Fist first appeared in Captain America 194, Jack Kirby's run. It was the Mad Bomb saga.
Uh-huh.
So he appeared during that, and his only other appearances were in the New Defenders.
There you go. So Peter Gillis is hearkening back to those issues of Captain America, apparently.
Yep, there we go.
Anyway, we get the Beast and Angel having an interesting conversation about what the Defenders needs to be, and that they need a real, clear, organizational leader. And as we talked about, the Angel's talking about how the Champions was a disaster, but it was a disaster because, we were not cohesive. And he says about the Defenders, we have no adequate security system, no medical facilities, no real legal status. Despite our government clearance, Candy can't be pulling strings in Washington every time we deliver a crook.
Right.
So they're talking about the fact they need a leader, somebody to make the concept work. And Hank says, we always had Professor X in the X-Men. We always had Captain America in the Avengers. And Beast says, well, you don't just assume a role like that. And then, foreshadowing, Brian. Candy Southern walks in and says, I've got papers that you need to sign. There's a proxy fight going on at Contest. She's handling Warren's business.
That's right. He says to her, what would Worthington Industries do without you?
Exactly. And she says, probably get bought out by Southern International. So we see potentially the buildup of something here.
Exactly.
Which I'd completely forgotten about.
Yeah. And we then cut to the kitchen because we've also completely forgotten about Dolly and her relationship with Isaac, a.k.a. the Gargoyle. And, she's in the kitchen thinking, I know they've tried everything, but Doctor Strange was away somewhere. And other than him, where do you go when someone you love vanishes in a puff of smoke?
Right.
And I love that scene. And where is Gargoyle? Because apparently when he disappeared, that was not Manslaughter's doing.
Yep. Well, we were made to think it was, Brian.
Right.
But instead,
we find a fortress halfway around the world where we find our answers.
We find our answers. He's actually in captivity. And we're not going to see just yet who is holding him captive.
That's right.
In this fortress halfway around the world. But we will see it soon.
Right.
Then we see the, what's his name? Blowtorch Brand. I was going to say Boston Brand, but that's not the same character. Blowtorch Brand is being bailed out. And this guy says, Mr. Brand, I won't mince words. I do not admire you. I have a proposition to make to you. That is all. And basically, he wants to hire Blowtorch Brand to go after the Defenders. And he's going to give him $5,000 to do it.
That's right. I'm thinking about Blowtorch Brand and Dollar Bill. And who was the guy during the Defender for a Day saga whose name we delighted over? Do you remember?
I don't remember. But I mean, there were
Joe
lots of
or
them.
something like Joe the Gorilla.
Joe the Gorilla. There you go. That's right.
We need a super team with all.
No, not with Blowtorch Brand, because I'm pretty sure after this issue he's never seen again, and rightly so. In any case, the Defenders are called down to Elijah because there's a massive fire.
2 days later, we should point out.
Oh, 2 days later, the Defenders are called down to Elijah. There's a massive fire, and there are women. There's a maniac inside who wants the women who are trapped inside to die. There are 20 people, apparently all of them women. I don't know why that is, but all trapped inside. And
we find out the women are all immigrants. They're all Mexican immigrants.
And Blowtorch Brand had been expressing his thoughts about that at the bar earlier, so that makes sense.
That's right. And he tells them, he says, the flames are going to eat up the no good Mex chickies all up, but they won't eat me.
No.
And again, Mex chickies is a dialogue. Please don't, take Chris and I repeating the dialogue as an endorsement of anything.
Well, no, and interestingly, again, I think it's fascinating because you could get this right now.
Yeah.
Which is sad. In any case, they make short work of him. We don't need to spend too much time going through that. They make short work of him, and then something's happening to Cloud. Warren says, I'll get you out of here. He grabs her. He flies her up through the roof. I always find it fascinating. Oh, I'm sorry. So, Warren has Iceman ice up his fists so he can burst through the roof. Then Valkyrie grabs Blowtorch Brand and puts a sword to his throat. But the defenders, get the women out, essentially.
Right. Right, and Valkyrie captures Blowtorch Brand, and but it turns out there's two women inside that the defenders did not see, and the sheriff runs in for them, rescues the ladies, but unfortunately he is breathed in the flames. His lungs are singed.
Yeah, and this is interesting though, Brian, because we have right prior to that when the sheriff runs in, Angel's going to go in after him, and Valkyrie stops him and says, "Let him go, Warren. It is as it should be."
Right.
And when he comes out, the sheriff has breathed in too much of the flame and he dies. But Valkyrie says, "There are few who die as heroes in this day and age, but we are there for those who do." And the sheriff says, "You," as if he recognizes her for what she is, a Valkyrie, right. A chooser of the slain in Norse mythology who will spirit the dying hero off to Valhalla. And she says, "The valiant have ever deserved an escort of honor when they embark on a journey." And when she comes back, the defenders are shocked, but she says, "Why the surprise, my friends? You've known for a long time what we Valkyries are. Now let us go and remember a true hero."
That's right. And that's where we end. Next week, we will find out the fate of the gargoyle. We will find out more about what's going on with Cloud. I will tell you, next week's cover to issue 136, for those of you reading along at home, one of my favorite Defenders covers.
Yeah, by far.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the best. And you're right. I mean, we're getting to the point where we're really getting into what Gillis is going for here, and I love it.
I do too. I do too. You know what else I love?
What's that?
I love your other podcast, Three Guys with Beards, that you do every week with James Moore, Jonathan Mayberry, and some rotating co-hosts. I also love the Horror Show with Brian Keene, the podcast I do every week with Mary Sangiovanni and Dave Thomas and Matt Wilderson. Both of those can be heard wherever you hear Defenders Dialogue, and they're made possible by the Project Entertainment Network. If you enjoy our show and you'd like to support us, you do that by supporting our network. Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com. If you'd like to sponsor the show, there's information there on how to do that. If you'd like to wear a Defenders Dialogue t-shirt, you can do that there on the website as well.
Well, you know what I say, Brian?
What do you say?
Well, naturally, I say, Excelsior, true believers. And I'm excited. You know what else I'm excited about before we go? I'm excited about the rumor that I heard that the new Doctor Strange movie might have Namor in it.
Let's just say I know some things about the new Doctor Strange movie, but I cannot confirm or deny that Namor is in it.
Oh, okay. I figured you would know some things, and I think we might need to get a certain person on this podcast. I don't know.
Yeah, I can confirm now. It's public knowledge that I'm writing a Thor audio series for Marvel and Serial Box. I'm a member of the writing team, and Chris, an exclusive, I managed to work the elf with a gun into it and got it approved. Now, I don't know if he'll make it past all the final edits, but as of right now, there is a scene between Thor and the elf with a gun. I feel like I have achieved everything. That's my last.
I was going to say, you can die happy now. The elf with a gun. Jesus. All right. Well, I'm glad that you and I are sharing this moment together, because I'm probably the only person on earth who would understand your pride in that. Everyone else would just go, what the fuck is wrong with you? On that note, I say Excelsior again, true believers, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
You're listening to American Top 40. More tragedy in the news today. Kim Kardashian has a new baby. What the hell? There's nothing good to listen to. Hey, wait, what's this?
Anything moist. You gotta roll that out.
See, it makes me do weird things. I don't like it.
God damn it.
I'd be going down on myself.
Shit.
Hey guys, it's Bill
Mick
Maya.
and Junior
from the Unsupervised Podcast.
Check us out every Thursday on the Project Entertainment Network.
Take a break from the stress of the world and come have a laugh with or at us.
Bill.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology featuring short fiction from the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network shows. Three guys with beards: Jim Moore, Jonathan Maybury, and Chris Golden.
Tom Clark from Necrocast Igborn.
Brian Keene of The Horror Show. Chuck Buda. And Armand Rosamilio of The Mando Method. Mary San Giovanni of Cosmic Shenanigans. Jay Wilburn from Matters of Faith. John Urban, sick of ink stains.
Bizung's Mr. Frank.
Available on Kindle and in paperback and through the Project Entertainment Network store.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.